Hi again, it's Marty coming to you from Bountiful, Utah. I appreciate your curiosity for this video's topic, psychologically primed for religion. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, let me explain just a little bit about my channel. I think it'll help you understand what my videos are all about. I promise you I'll do my best to make it worth your while. The information I share on my videos, like today's topic, are all from the book I wrote titled An Atheist Delusion, a Latter-day Saints perspective on Richard Dawkins' anti-theist, anti-Christ book, The God Delusion. Once you know this is why I set up my channel, I think it'll help you understand what my videos are all about. You see, back in 2015, I had an experience that required that I read Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. I'm sure you recognize his name. He's the world-renowned atheist and evolutionary biologist who goes around the world trying to get converts to atheism. Anyway, while reading his book, I found myself taking a lot of notes, and it soon turned into a manuscript for the book that I titled An Atheist Delusion. Now, after I published it, I decided to set this YouTube channel up so I could do short videos covering every single argument Mr. Dawkins put forth in his book, which, by the way, its purpose, he said, was to make atheists out of all of us, because he thinks his arguments against God's existence are very probable. I searched to find out if there were any Latter-day Saints who had gone in and responded to Richard's book, but I couldn't find anyone who had done that, so I decided to step up as a theist and be counted. An atheist delusion is my rebuttal to all of Richard's arguments, each one coming from my perspective as a Latter-day Saint. I believe the true and living God exists, and this particular video you're watching now is part 91 in the series of videos I've done so far. So with that said, let's pick it up where I left off last time. I was just about ready to start the subtitle called Psychologically Primed for Religion. So let's go ahead and go right to there. In this subtitle, Richard suggests the idea that a psychological byproduct could, I repeat, could grow naturally out of the important and developing field of evolutionary psychology. Isn't it interesting how natural selection and evolution, Darwin's evolution theory, has just blossomed into anything and everything. Now it's a whole entire field on evolutionary psychology. Here's the heart of Richard's byproduct that changed the question by simply renaming the word theory that I say is made up. Just as the eye is an evolved organ for seeing and the wing an evolved organ for flying, Richard says, so the brain is a collection of organs or modules for dealing with a set of specialist data processing needs, end quote. Richard continues to say, religion can be seen as a byproduct of the misfiring of several modules involved in the wet brain and the activity in the wet brain. To me, Richard is saying that religion is a result of a brain-flatulent, a continual misfiring of the brain's modules. Come on, Richard. He continues, for example, the modules for forming theories out of other minds, for forming coalitions, and for discriminating in favor of in-group members and against strangers, any of these could serve as the human equivalent of the moth's celestial navigation system, it being vulnerable to misfiring in the same kind of way as he suggested for childhood gullibility. As you can see by Richard's comparisons here, it is just another way of saying the wet brain's hardware is all that's needed for thinking, and somehow this hardware misfired and popped out religion. Religion! He then says this suggests that just as evolution does it in the biological world, it can produce new and improved ways of doing it in the world of religion. It is not far-fetched, he says, to imagine that in the world of religious thought or mind, evolution could easily produce or evolve this idea of religion being some sort of survival value or purpose of something else. And that's why it came into existence. In other words, natural selection is now writing its own code and changing things up and moving the goalpost. And in this roundabout way, roundabout way, religion meets the rules of natural selection. And that's why it continues to exist even today. Ta-da! I get it. In other words, this misfired byproduct now has survival purpose, but it's being manifested somewhere else. That, my friends, is truly an atheist delusion, a grasping at straws, a changing of the goalpost, like I said. Now evolution's rules for survival can evolve themselves so that they will match up with any new theory that comes along. Well, to me, this is a lot like the reasons professional basketball players choose to compete in a dunking contest, which is, of course, to entertain the public, and elevate the player's market value. But I also believe these players participate in these kinds of contests because they also want to impress their peers. And that's what I think Richard's trying to do with his book and this unusual argument against religion. He's trying to entertain for sure, but he is also trying to elevate his own professionally perceived value in the minds of his peers. Richard goes on to say, other byproduct explanations of religion, besides the intention stance or the dualistic stance, have been proposed by Hindi, Shermer, Boyer, Altran, Bloom, Dennett, Kellerman, and others. Those are his peers. Like I said, I think Richard has chosen to posit such a grasping at straws kind of theory in an effort to impress his atheist peers, and hopefully in the process it allows him the opportunity to self-aggrandize himself. For me, it does nothing to prop up or move the belief cursor towards God's non-existence at all. You will come to see that all the intellectualizing found in the remaining 5 chapters of Richard's book doesn't add one scintilla of well-informed evidence to the argument of whether or not God exists. After reading The God Delusion in its entirety, I came away with the feeling as though his arguments ran through my fingers like grains of sand until I had nothing in my hand but to substantiate God's non-existence. It just didn't happen. So that all that was left were my own table of belief support stand reference legs of evidence, each of which point towards the probability that God does in fact exist. No more, it says the plausible theorem is that Jesus was the very Son of God. That's what religion's theorem is out there. That he came to earth and became mortal so he could restore his pure gospel on earth once again in the meridian of time, because it had been corrupted by religionists in that day. And that state of affairs assured his death. The religionists of that day, I believe, the Pharisees, Sanhedrin, and so forth, were in full-blown apostasy and were exercising unrighteous dominion through their priestcraft. After Christ and his apostles were all dead, many new apostate doctrines were springing forth and flourishing, and they continued to do so until Joseph Smith's day in 1820. In a very real sense, Richard actually confirms my perspective here when he says, quote, religions, like languages, evolve with sufficient randomness from beginnings that are sufficiently arbitrary to generate the bewildering and sometimes dangerous richness of diversity that we observe today. Well, in Joseph Smith's time, the diversity had grown to over 200 denominations or religions. Today, a study has been done that there's over 46,000 denominations / churches, religions throughout the world with 10 or more chief dominant religions. That's exactly what I have been saying about apostasy and how it corrupts pure religion. In fact, out of that 46, there's probably 40,000 of those that are evangelical types in some way or another. That's a lot of differences. Pure religion is modified by man's so-called misfired belief system. So a lot of people have had a lot of misfiring going on. Richard's evolutionist mind has been conditioned to see religion as a feature produced by the human species mind, his wet brain. He then tries to convince all of us with his grasping at straws theorizing, his atheistic guessing of where all these false religions come from. The next subtitle is Tread Softly Because You Tread on My Means. That's the end of this really short subtitle. So I'm going to close it off because we're going to do another video that's not from my book, that some things have been pressing upon my mind that fit so beautifully under. So I'm going to be back in just a moment doing another video. I don't want to make this too long, so we'll stop here. Any thoughts you have on this topic and the questions you may have, I'd love to answer them. I'd love to respond to you and reply to your comments. But until next time, I want to wish you continued success. Goodbye.